All right, here I am again. So let's get going with the risk matrix. Okay, we've identified the hazards in the last module. Now what do we do? Now we have to determine which of the hazards are the most serious risks so we can look at those first. Makes sense. You don't want to look at something that is not very dangerous, not very much risk. So let's look at the most important ones first. And that's what the risk matrix will determine. And that's where the risk matrix comes in. There are many different risk matrices out there. If you look on the internet, you're going to find hundreds or thousands of them, just like for the hierarchy of controls too. But in process safety management, PSM, we used a 4x4 matrix, mainly because that's the one that the ammonia industry used, and so did our consultant during a process hazard analysis. So we'll talk about PSM later. We use that in there because that's what they did. But I prefer the 5x5 one, which we're going to use in this course and any other of my courses too. So let's look at it, and then we're going to discuss it. That's what it looks like. It's pretty simple when you look at it. You have the severity level going from lowest to highest, the likelihood going from lowest to highest. So, and then you have incident outcomes. You have health effects, property damage, or environmental impact. And then your likelihood could be very unlikely, possible, likely, or very likely. Sneeze. So, and at the bottom is a recap, and we'll cover that in a little bit. So we're going to start at the left, the severity level. One thing I like about this particular risk matrix is that it has 3 different categories of incident outcomes. There you go, incident outcomes, 3 different ones. 3 are health effects, which is people, property damage, and environmental impact. An event could have an impact on any one or more of these categories, but usually the predominant outcome will be one of them. Here are the health effects, which is people. First aid or no injury illness, illness, no lost days, injury illness with 1 or more days away from work, a permanent partial disability, hospitalization of 3 or more, death or permanent disability. Now, we've talked about what makes an accident OSHA recordable, but that's really not taken into account here, except of course if it was first aid or no injury illness, it wouldn't be OSHA recordable. So starting out with number 2 would probably be OSHA recordable, but it might not be. If it's 2, it might be a gray area, but everything else would certainly be. The next column is property damage. These starts off with number 1 is light, 2 is moderate, 3 is significant, 4 is severe, and 5 is catastrophic. And 3rd is environmental impact, light, and then 2 is moderate, 3 is moderate reversible, 4 is significant reversible, and 5 is significant. Now, on all 3 of those things, they're subject to sometimes conjecture you talk about. That's why it's good to have more than one person do this and get different input in it, so because these are somewhat subjective. Now let's move to likelihood of occurrence, reading across the top. 1 is very unlikely, 2 is unlikely, 3 is possible, 4 is likely, and 5 is very likely. Again, likelihood of occurrence over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, so as you can see, then, now let's go here. The severity level number is then multiplied by the likelihood of occurrence number to get the risk number. Pretty simple. Across the bottom of the chart, the risk numbers are ranked too. There's just so you what left that you know what they are, and that's what the color coding is based on. 15 or higher is very high risk. 15 or greater. 10 to 14 high risk. 5 to 9 moderate risk. And 1 to 4 low risk. That's just when you multiply those 2 factors and you get one of these risk numbers. That's where which group it would fall in would depend on the risk. The color coding is just to make it easier to read and interpret. So we use the risk number for several reasons. First, let's get an idea of the severity of a hazard. If we've done all this and we get it's very low, it's a 3 or a 4, maybe even a 5. Maybe we'll want to get to it, but we might not have to do that right now. Now, so that, or let's say we have encountered several hazards. So let's do a risk matrix on each one of them so we can determine the priorities. Let's look at the ones with the highest risk. Now, at 3, we can establish a risk number for the current system. In other words, we can analyze and say, this is the way we're doing it, and it's risk number 18, let's say. And then we can introduce controls and ascertain the revised risk number to get an idea of how good the controls are. So if we lower that risk from an 18 to a 6, something like that, well, then the controls have done some good. Again, this is what it looks like. It's nothing, it's pretty simple. 5 times 5 is 25, as you can see. 4 times 4 is 16. And again, the color coding, just to give you an idea of, to make it easier to interpret and read. So that's pretty simple. The risk matrix is pretty simple to use. And so the next step is a hierarchy of controls. So I'll see you in the next one.